Hey, everybody, welcome to the Freedom Stories podcast. As usual, I am your host, Pastor Fury. And if you've never been listening or watching this podcast before, this is a show where we sit down with a different person who we know is experiencing freedom, and they will walk us through that story of receiving freedom in Jesus, the story of where they are on that spectrum between complete bondage and absolute freedom. And we all know that only comes through Jesus. So today I'm super excited that I get to introduce you guys to a friend of mine that I've been journeying with for a little over a year now. Amazing man of God, Greg Harris. He's a minister, a pastor. He's I don't know if he goes by pastor or not, but he definitely is a pastor. You can't put a title on a shepherd's heart, and he's got a shepherd's heart. And he's also amazing father and husband, and he's been doing a lot of work in his community. So I'd love to give him an opportunity now to say hi, and we'll get into his story for real. So Greg, say hi to everybody.
Before I say hi, I just want to do this thing real traditional, like giving honor to God, who's the head of my life, First Lady Harris, because without her blessing, I wouldn't be here. No, what's up, y'all?
You can do that, though. I like how you ended up doing it without doing it, and we got to be
right.
Oh man, so y'all, let's just get right into it, Greg. So I know you have and the word of my day is dynamic. I know you have a very dynamic story, but let's take us back to whenever for you was the first time you were experiencing this new life, this new birth, this freedom in Jesus, and maybe walk us through a little bit of what life was like in the season leading up to that, and how much of that you ever want to share. We got time, brother, so go there.
So first of all, I guess the process for me was from jump, right?
Mm.
Because my father was a pastor. So, but I guess the thing that was lacking, I had knowledge, but I didn't have relationship.
Mm.
So for the longest, probably up until age 25, I really didn't live for God. I knew of God, thought I had a relationship with God, probably like so many people do. And but it wasn't until 20, like somewhere in my 20s, roughly I'd say 25, that I really like came in, like experienced God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And still that was, I guess, kind of like the story of the blind man who was touched twice by Jesus. I
Mm-hmm.
saw, but I didn't see. You follow me? Like things
Yeah.
cleared up, but it still wasn't clear. So at age 25, I rededicated my life to the Lord. I had been wilding out, you know what I'm saying? From 15 to 25, I had been wilding out. PK kid, gone bad, to going wild. I was out in the streets. I was a poor hustler. At that time, 17, I want to say, no, 18, we had our first child. 19, I was married. But still wilding out, you know what I mean? But
yeah, so hold up, slow down. Let's double back a little bit. So whereabouts were you living? Were you in the States
at
somewhere?
that time I was living in Sarasota, Florida.
Okay, so is that where you grew up?
We moved to Sarasota when I was 15. And so I grew up in Mobile, Alabama.
Okay, so the first chunk of your life, you're in Mobile, Alabama. 15, yep. You guys moved down to Sarasota, Florida. Is your father still pastoring down in Sarasota?
No, my father passed away in 2017.
Oh, he passed away then.
Yeah, he passed away.
No, I mean, was he? Well, first of all, I'm sorry, man.
No, it's all good. He's with the Lord now.
Yeah, amen.
So yeah.
But in when you were 15, was your father pastoring?
Yes.
And that was
Sarasota.
In Sarasota. Okay, yep. And so then at that time, I know you said at 17 you guys had your first child. when did you meet your wife? Like you were in high school or?
So like I said, my father was pastoring all my life,
Mhm.
but and when I was 14, he was pastoring in Mobile, Alabama. At age 14, he felt the call. When I was 14, he felt called to down south, and so a church, True Vine Missionary Baptist Church, called him up, and it just so happens that I guess the interview per se happened on my birthday weekend. So the church found out about it, and they decided to throw me a surprise birthday party full of kids that I did not know. So I showed up, and there was this one young lady there. I'll say, I always say girl, but one young lady there by the name of Rashonda that I met. So out of the trip, as whack as it was, because my parents were moving me away from everything that I knew, right
Right.
at the prime of my teenage years.
Mhm.
Um, I met this young lady, and I was like, "Yo, so it is one good thing coming out of the move." I met Shonda, and when we touched down, I'd be able to holler at her. Little did
Right.
I know, Shonda didn't even go to the church. She had some
She just
cousins
happened to
that,
be at that party?
yeah, man, she had some cousins that periodically went to that church, and they found out about the party and showed up. So I guess they kind of crashed the party a little bit.
Right.
But anyway, so when we finally touched down, she wasn't nowhere to be found, right? So anyway, the question was, I'm a little ADD.
No, so I was just trying to get a little bit more clarity and add some background color to the story leading up to you getting to know
Having a
Jesus. So
child.
yeah, as you were with your father as he's going through ministry, and now you're turning 15. It sounds like at this
Right.
party, and you meet Chandra, and
Yeah.
between 15 and 17, it sounds like the relationship's going well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and in
yeah.
some
So
ways maybe a
I
little
didn't
bit
see, I
better.
didn't see, I didn't see Shonda again till a couple of weeks before my 16th birthday.
Oh,
I was
okay.
working at Winn Dixie, and she came in her McDonald's uniform, looking all fine. You know what I'm saying? And she came through my line, and she was like, "Yo, so what's up?" I'm like, "Yo, you tell me. Y'all have me and my boys. We having a party this weekend. Why don't you swing through that thing?" So
Right.
she showed up, man, and we've been kicking it ever since.
Okay, and now you as a 16-year-old young man, though your father's the pastor, you're not quite living like, I mean, I guess in a way you're living like the pastor's kids, right? Because
I'm more
so
like, yeah,
many
man.
preachers' kids are wilding out.
I definitely had multiple masks that I was wearing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
So on
yeah.
Sundays and on Wednesday nights, I could uh do the church boy look, and then the rest of the time I was wilding out kind of. But
Yeah.
that was learned because I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. We lived in an all white neighborhood, so I was the only black kid, right? And then but my father pastored a pretty much predominantly black church in the middle of the hood,
Mm,
the Trinity Garden. So on Sundays, I would have to put my black on, and then Monday through Saturday, I was skateboarding and doing all this other stuff. So I just kind of learned how to, you know, become a chameleon. So,
yeah.
which calls for a lot of, should I say, confusion and
Mhm.
inner
Identity
conflict
issues.
and, yeah, man, identity issues all day. So yeah, so when we moved to Sarasota, and I found myself in similar, circumstances, because I found out my black wasn't black enough. You know
Mm,
what I'm saying? And so
mhm.
I found myself doing a whole lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing to prove myself to a whole lot of people that really didn't have, my best interest in mind,
Yeah.
and got in a lot of trouble.
Man, I did not know any of this, and it's almost like you just opened up my diary and were
Mm.
sharing my story a little bit because I grew up in an all-white suburb in the south suburbs of Chicago, but every Sunday we drove into the south side an all-black church, and
Mm.
so I know you know, two white for the black kids, two black for the white kids, and wearing the masks because you're trying to find acceptance and belonging in whatever situation you're in, and you feel like just being you in whatever situation is doesn't quite cut it, right? So you got to
Yep.
Yeah. No, I feel you on that, man. That was a thing that messed up a lot of my identity issues early on, and I think you said it was, you ended up doing stuff that you just knew you shouldn't have been in places you knew you shouldn't have been.
And you know that I think that's probably a good segue. You haven't even asked the question, or I don't know if you plan to ask the question, but as it pertains to my freedom walk, right? My freedom
Yeah, freedom
story.
story, man. Your journey in that.
At 25, when I did rededicate my life to the Lord, a lot of what I just said played a role in that, right? Like my
Mm,
identity. So, what I started doing was I just started, okay, so I'm rededicating my life to the Lord. And so that must look like what I see around me. And
mm,
so, even though my heart was in the right place, I took those survival trait skills that I had learned, right? And I just applied those to a new frame of mind per se. So I started wearing suits and things, and I
right.
started, trying to talk the lingo. Like I said, first giving honor to God, the head of my, those
Right, right. All of that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of that stuff I learned, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff, but that stuff was not me. But
Right.
so I traded
Mhm,
one form of bondage for
mhm.
another form. You know,
That's deep.
it may not be bondage to some people. That's just authentically who they are. So I don't want anybody to
Right.
take that the wrong way. But for me, it wasn't who I was.
Yeah, you just went from playing one role to another role.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yep.
I
And didn't
totally.
re- and the sad part about it is I didn't realize I was playing a role. I
Mhm.
thought that's what it was to be a Christian. That's what it
Yeah,
was to be saved. You
yeah.
know. Yeah.
Man, see, I didn't even really engage with what that looked like for me as much until you're even sharing this right now, because there's so much of it that you don't realize. Like you at that point when you're coming to know the Lord, you don't know what's cultural and what's biblical and what like
Mhm.
is, this is as a result of the Spirit now indwelling in me, or this is a result of me just being around people that do things this way, talk this way, look this way, so on and so forth. Yeah, yeah, that has a big role in our formation, and I think,
Mhm.
and I wonder if that's something that we should probably in our discipleship really speak to more intentionally, because I know I don't really do that, but speak to more intentionally as I'm discipling people,
Mhm.
like, because they're learning the biblical things, right? They're learning the language of the word and the activity of obedience to Jesus, and they're hopefully learning how to hear from the Spirit, but they're also learning the way that Greg does life, and the way that Greg does this, and the way that Greg does that, or the way that Armand does this, and like, so where are they learning the difference between
Mhm.
what's Gregory
Mm.
Harris
Mm.
versus what's
Mm.
actually Jesus?
That's
And
good, man. That's good. And because I guess the facade it's not a facade, my identity, right? I guess can almost become for somebody else a mask.
yeah.
If they take what they see in me, the way I carry myself and the way I talk, and they chalk that up to, okay, that's what it looks like, then that can
Hmm.
become bondage for them, in a way.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
they don't
man,
even, and
that's
like you said, they don't even realize it.
yeah, yeah.
Like you said, they don't even. I know. I That literally happened to me, and I didn't realize it either until, gosh, I was turning 30. Or no, that's not true. When I turned 30 is when I got saved. So it was, I don't do math, 2018. So
We
whatever
got
that
two.
was years
Yeah,
ago
you
was
sure
when
have
I
to mess
started
up.
realizing, oh, a lot of my formation was actually like cultural and personality formation based on the context that I was following Christ in, versus like what is actually who I am. And I think when you come from a place of having so many identity issues early on, learning the difference there becomes really important, because you've yet to really learn how to be you.
Mhm.
Because when you become, a follower of Christ, now like you recognize there's a lot of you that's broken, that you need to like surrender and submit. And like, what if you're surrendering and submitting just parts of how you're wired? and that's actually not sinful. That's just you and your unique cultural, thing that you're bringing to the table. So I didn't mean to go there and get all like
Oh
deep as
man,
you
that's good stuff, bro. That's good stuff.
and maybe that's why the Lord put it on my heart when he was sending me out, that I need to focus less on just being the one doing everything and more about being a convener of people and like working with a team. Because you know what I think what might be a good fix for this, and I swear this is the last thing I'm gonna say before I get back to answering or asking questions.
Good, bro. Good.
Is really intentionally doing discipleship in community. And I don't just mean it like as a church, which yes, but like when I was being discipled early on, it was always one-on-ones. Like, I'm just talking to you one-on-one. Let me hear what's going on in your life, and let me walk you through how I see this, and yada yada yada. And it was all good, but like there's also a sense of maybe if we had more discipleship groups where it's like it's not just you and the pastor or you and that leader, but like you and maybe 2 or 3 others, where y'all are all doing discipleship together, that you're now receiving different understandings about what it looks like to follow Jesus through different people's lives. So I think as you have a multiplicity of ways that you're seeing people do life, then you can see, I think we had this conversation in one of our cohorts, because I feel like I'm like, when you have the multiplicity of ways that you're seeing people do life, then you can kind of see the common thread in all of those. Oh, you do it this way, but this, and you do it this way, but this. Oh, there's the but this. That's Jesus, right?
And the trap, I guess, and that especially we as men get into a lot of times is the fix it trap. Right. So everybody comes to us, especially new believers, when you're talking about discipleship, they come to us with maybe a slew of questions or a slew of problems, right? And they pour them out, and then we go about prescribing the solution or of trying to apply the word. And so like I told you before, I was meeting with a young brother before we got started. And one of the things that I stressed to him was like, listen, man, and this is just authentic to me, right? Like when you live, I mean, I realize my hood is not the hood for some people. Right. But when you live amongst an environment where you really don't know who you're coming in contact with, and you got babies at home, you know what I mean? You have to walk with people conscientiously, you know what I mean? Cautiously, should I say. And so the brother I was meeting with, I'm like, listen, man, you new to the faith, you know what I'm saying? And we're trying to grow with each other, and we've known each other for 3 weeks now, but let's be 100. You still really don't know me. I still really don't know you. And so right now we're in this this portion of our relationship where we kind of, we're developing trust for one another. Yeah. Right. And so a couple weeks after he was coming here, he asked for $60 to borrow it. And God he's blessed me with enough to be able to share $60 with somebody. So I was like, cool, man. I was like, are you sure you need to borrow it? Or I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. This is the conversation we have. So I'm not trying to be funny, but you need to borrow it, or would it be better having it?
Yeah, it's just a gift.
You follow me? And, and I broke it down to him. I said, because if you're borrowing it, then you're putting an expectation of repayment. And I said, if you don't pay me back, I said, ain't no love lost, but just realize next time you come around talking about, I want to borrow some money, bruh, I can't help. I mean, you ain't paid me back for the last 60 I gave you. Right. So I was up front with him, right? Cool. So it ain't no love lost. And then guess what? That week he wasn't able to pay me, but he called me and communicated. Right. And then today when we met, like the first thing brother does when he hops out the truck. He comes over to me and he tries to hand me the $60 back. You know, little did he know God had already told me to just let him have the $60.
Right.
So when we sat down, you know, and I told him, hold on to it for a minute. And we got to that point. I'm like, and I told you what I just shared at the beginning, like developing trust. I said, man, don't worry about the 60. God already told me to let you have that. You know what I'm saying? And I said, not like $60 ain't a lot of money to me, but I'm just being obedient. But that's who I am. That's who I've learned to be. Like, yo, let's be upfront with people. Let's talk to people. You know what I'm talking about? Let's not hold grudges. I don't want you, you know. And so I broke it down to the brother, like, yo, man, you like, I earned trust with you by letting you borrow the 60, right? And I said, you've earned trust with me because you showed me you was ready to pay it back to me. Right.
Yeah.
And so not that I even get it back. And now, once again, it's a trust, like a love factor, right? God told me already that you had that, bro. So, you know, and so I just pivot off that, just going back to like being lost and being in bondage. And like, so after in 2005, I rededicated, not 2005, 2003, 2004. I rededicated my life in 2005. Like, I felt like God was calling me to ministry. It was like
I'm so sorry. Did something happen right before you rededicated your life that was like, oh man, like it was a moment where God just like rushed in and was like, it's time, you know?
Yeah. Like I told you before, I was wilding out.
Yeah.
So and I was a poor hustler. I wasn't never one of these hustlers that made a lot of money. I made enough money to supply my habits and to pay maybe a couple bills. Right. So I was at this stage where I was like, okay, yo, am I gonna really do this to make some money, some real money, to put, you know, food on the table for my kids and to take care of them, or am I just gonna do this and let that be that? And so I had came to the conclusion, like, yo, I'm gonna up the ante. So I called up one of my friends who, you know, dealt in weight, and he was willing to put me on, and he just had a heart to heart. He's like, yo, so you know, if I put you on, you're just going to have a bigger target on your back, right? And I took that into consideration. And so the next day, man, no lie, and like I said, I'm a poor hustler, so I had a part-time job working at Publix. You know what I'm saying? Publix supermarket. If you're up north, you don't know nothing about Publix. But
I was literally just at a Publix because I was down in Gainesville last weekend.
Yeah, Publix, what it is, man. Nah, but I was working part-time at Publix. I got in my car the next day to get ready to go to work. Right. And I just had a heart to heart with God. I'm like, Lord, I said, man, if you're real, I said, just give me some sort of sign. I said, I'm not trying to test you. I just need some direction, because if you don't have plans for my life, I said, these are the plans I'm about to make, you know. And it was just a heart to heart. And that's the way, that's pretty much how the conversation went. Right. And I said, amen, croak up my car and headed to work. So I got to the Publix, pulled up to the light, and a semi truck pulled up like catty corner to me. And on the trailer of the semi truck, it said, come follow me into a new and exciting fellowship. Right, bro?
Like, he literally gave you a sign. Like,
man, I'm saying, right. Like, I would have been more specific. If I had known he was going to give me a sign, I'd have been like, yo, Lord, bust the heavens open. I need some angels to talk to your boy. You know what I'm talking about? He sends me an 18-wheeler trailer. You know what I'm saying? So,
wow.
So literally, I'm sitting in my car and I look at that and I go, nah. I go through the whole day at work convincing myself it was just coincidence. I ain't tell nobody. I didn't want anybody to go, oh, that's God trying to talk to you. Right. By the end of the day, man, I had convinced myself it was just a coincidence, and I had a blunt rolled up in the ashtray and everything. And so when I clocked out, my conscience was free, went on about my regular business. Just so happens I some kind of way found myself in church, in my father's church, that following that weekend. And in the middle of his sermon, he stops and he says, you know, sometimes we'll ask God for a sign, and he'll literally give us a sign, and we'll make ourselves think it's a coincidence. Well, I had to be. I am a stubborn dude, right? Wow. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, nah, He ain't talking to me. Because in the back of my mind, I'm like, I didn't want a literal sign. I wanted a sign, like the sign you see in the movies. You know what I'm saying? Like something I can go out and just like lay it all down for and just be diehard for Jesus Christ. You can't be diehard about no 18-wheeler sign you saw. Anyway. So that's what I said to myself. I'm like, no, that's not what it's going to be. And so he said that, and then he continued on in his sermon. And then he stopped and he backed up. He said, I don't know. He said, I don't know what's going on. He says, God's trying to get something through to somebody. He says, sometimes you can ask God for a sign, and he'll literally give you a sign, and you'll make yourself think it's a coincidence. He says, and he backed up, he started walking back and forth in the pulpit, pacing. He said, I'm not talking about you walking down the sidewalk and a piece of paper blows by and you pick it up. And it's a sign on a piece of paper. It's a message on a piece of paper. I'm talking about a sign big as a billboard. Now, when he said sign big as a billboard, bro, wow. I just heard this little still voice. Like we classify it as our conscience a lot of times. I just heard this. Now, if you want to believe it was a coincidence, you go right ahead. And I was just like, okay. Wow. And I just started slowly surrendering stuff. So that deal that I was talking to you about that was supposed to be made never went through. I just started just letting go of stuff. And so what I started doing was I just started showing up on Wednesday nights at church, just taking out the trash, doing whatever I could to help out, just to be around church. And one thing led to another. One of the youth teachers, hollered at me. He's like, hey, would you mind sitting in on a class with the teenagers? And I said, what does that mean? I mean, because I don't want to teach. What does that mean? And she was like, well, as we go through the lesson, if you have any thoughts or, you have any input, you can just share that. I'm like, okay, cool.
I can do that. Okay.
I can do that. Yeah. And so I started doing that for a few months. And then the next thing you know, I got a phone call. Brother Greg, I can't make it this evening. And I was calling you to see if you would teach the class. What does that look like? Well, you've been going through the lessons with us. I got the materials. All you got to do is just read it a little, go over it and just do what you've been doing. You've been doing a great job.
Yeah.
I've been doing a great job, huh? Okay. I think I can do that. You know what I'm saying?
So it was progressively the Lord.
Yeah, man. The next step. And then all of a sudden, like after, like I said, that was in like late 2003, 2004, right? Early 2004. And during that time, man, I just got more involved. So I started going to Sunday school. And all of a sudden, it was like everything that I looked at, like whether it was social media, was new back then for the most part. So I would, but anything I'd go to, it was, everything was saying like, preach. And I remember at that time, because I had given up hustling, I had to go full time at Publix, right? And, brother needed some benefits. And I was working the early morning shift. And so I needed to go to bed early. And my wife and kids were gone. And I was getting ready to go to bed at like 6:30 in the afternoon. And I bowed down on the side of my bed to pray. And as I went to pray, I just heard Mark 16:15. I didn't hear it audibly. It was almost like a thought that was just dropped into the middle of everything that I had going on in my mind. It was so precise that I looked around because it felt like somebody spoke it. And so I was like, man, that's crazy. Mark 16:15, that's pretty specific. So I went and opened up Mark 16:15, and it said, go ye into all the world, preaching the gospel to all creation, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, And so at that point, I'm just like, whoa, that's crazy. Okay. I just thought about it for a few days. And once again, because everything that I was looking at was saying preach, I finally went to my father and I'm like, hey, Dad, I think like God is calling me to preach. And he goes, okay, let's go to dinner and you can share with me what, God has been doing. So,
And how old were you at that point?
I was 25.
Okay.
Yep. I was 25. Well, it was Yeah, I was 25, bro. And it just went from there.
So that's the place where you're like now recognizing the calling. And so I'm assuming somewhere after there, maybe you started getting your feet wet in preaching. I know when we were kind of getting to know each other a little bit, I heard about you making your way to a church that I had actually gotten familiar with down in Tampa. So what brought you from Sarasota to Tampa? How did that transition happen?
So amidst all of that stuff, like I left out the part that when my pops was preaching, I was sitting at the drums, right?
Oh, so you were playing drums.
I was playing the drums, man. So because we didn't have a drum player, and so I go in there, I could hold a beat and whatnot, so I play the drums anyway. I've always had a love for music, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so before I rededicated my life to the Lord, I was doing secular rap,
I
just
don't know if I knew that.
recording and stuff of that nature, man. And so once I rededicated my life to the Lord, I actually put down all of that stuff, and then um, about a year and a half into just walking to that journey, I just felt like God had said to me one day, like, hey, you used to use your gifts to glorify the world, you can use those gifts to glorify me. So I thought, man, at that point, I thought I was on something new. Like all the Christian hip hop I had heard up to that moment had been like real corny
Oh
sounding
yeah.
hip hop, so I thought I was doing something new, and so I started recording and writing gospel rap, hip hop, and
Yeah.
from a Christian standpoint,
Yeah.
and man, so all of a sudden the guy I was sharing some of my music with one of the members, older kid that was visiting. And he was like, man,
Mhm.
you ever heard of Corey Red and Precise? I'm like,
Mm.
nah, who's that? He was like, man, I'm going to bring you a CD and let you check it out. Right. So, man, this dude brought me a Corey Red and Precise CD, and it just like blew the top off of my
You're
head.
like,
I'm
what?
like, yo, these dudes are doing it proper, like, right? I'm like,
Mm.
they're official, I mean,
Right,
like,
right.
I mean, shoot, but I'm like, man, I mean, they're hood certified for real. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So I'm just
Yeah,
sitting
yeah,
there like, okay, all right. That just made me even more hungry because I'm like, there's other brothers out there doing it. So once I heard Corey Red and Precise doing it at the level and the quality that they were doing it, it just made me up my game. It made me want to up my game even more. Right.
Mm.
So I just started doing it even more so. And I started, people started hearing about what I was doing and started inviting me to different events, youth programs and things of that nature. And one thing led to another. All of a sudden, I'm not the only one rapping. There's other brothers in the community also rapping, and we're connecting. And it's like, yo, man, you heard about Flavor Fest? I'm like, what's Flavor Fest? It's a concert at this church. It's this conference at a church called Crossover up in Tampa, taking place in a couple weeks. What? For real? Okay. You want to roll? Yeah. Rolled up, man. And don't you know, that was right. I guess that was just when Reach Records like was just really taking off. And
Really?
so, yep, Lecrae and Tadashi, them guys were there, man. And I guess at that conference that I attended, that was also what's his name? Oh, my mind just went blank.
KB?
KB, yes, KB was performing that night, and I guess that night. Pastor Tommy had KB go open up for 116 Lecrae and them, right? And so Lecrae heard KB and his homeboy Second Chance, man, and it was like, yo, I want to get to know y'all a little bit better. And so that
Mm.
was I saw the birth of that take
That's so
place.
dope.
I mean, and I say it from a point of like way, like I didn't know them, so it's not like I saw it, but I just
Right.
witnessed like after KB and Second Chance left the stage, Lecrae came up and was like, wow, man, those brothers, man, wow, because
Right.
they had given a
Do you know
testimony
do you know about when that was? Around what year that was?
that had to be somewhere probably around 2007. I want to say
Okay.
maybe
Yeah, yeah.
2006.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
early on. sure.
Yeah, like it wasn't long after. So I started preaching in 2005. So it might have been 2006. It
Okay.
had to be right up in that pocket somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And KB got up and he shared a testimony. I guess that weekend he had a cousin that had been killed, so he was
Mm.
attending a funeral, and he got up and he shared. He ran into a missionary worker, and the missionary asked him a question. He says, "Would you be interested in going over to another country?" And I think this is not verbatim, but KB replied like, "Yo, I ain't ready to die." And the
Mm.
missionary replied, "Well, aren't you already dead?"
Mm.
And it was just like, and KB shared that testimony, and after he shared, he says, because if we're already dead, why we're afraid to die,
Right.
you know
Right.
and then they went into the song, and
Mm.
just going in, and everybody just like, I mean, it was just like you pour gasoline on a fire, what I'm talking about. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was mind-blowing for me. But anyway, that being said, so I found out like, yo, this is part of who I am. This is
Yeah.
this is more authentic to me than the traditionary Baptist, missionary Baptist me. So
Right. Right. Right.
then I had two masks again to wear, right? So I'm I'm learning like, yo, I can be me. But then on
Mm.
Sundays, it was this, traditional, watered down me that really wasn't me.
Right. Right. Wow. And so that was around, you said 2006, 2007.
Yep.
And so you were experiencing now the reemergence of layers of you that you had, given up, but you realized you didn't have to necessarily say goodbye to. They just
Mhm.
needed to really be redeemed
Yes.
and something that the Lord would use. So did you then start attending crossover? Um,
That came a little bit later. Once again, like I said, that was something that didn't it did not re- it, it did resonate with me, but I didn't see how that fit into my current culture
okay,
that I
okay.
knew. So I just thought I thought they were two separate things. So,
Gotcha.
and so that's how I operated within them, as two
Okay.
separate things. And meanwhile, I was still working at Publix, right?
Mhm.
And 2006 turned into 2012, 2000 and 2011, somewhere around then. And I've advanced in Publix. I'm in management now, right? At the same time, I'm now considered a youth pastor at the church that I attend. And
Mhm.
so, and then I have two children, right? And so working 60 hours at Publix a week, plus trying to be a youth minister and then be a daddy and a husband, I
Right.
was getting burnt out. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
just really started seeking. I'm like, yo, what's up? I'm like, I was like, when I'm at Publix, I'm not happy, right?
Mhm.
And then when I'm at church, I'm too tired, so I'm not happy
Mhm.
because I don't have the energy to put into the thing that I feel like God has called me to do. And
Mhm.
so that being said, um, my wife and I, we started praying, started fasting, and we felt like God said, take a step of faith,
Mm.
take a step of faith. And so I went into Publix, and I gave them a 6-month notice because I felt like it was a step of faith, but at the same time, I wanted to leave a little room
Yeah,
to
yeah.
back out, change my mind. 6 months came and went. I went to, and bro, when I say I wanted to do this thing with wisdom,
Mhm.
right? So I went to my pastor slash father. I went to friends and just like, hey, I need some encouragement.
Mhm.
This is my mind. My mindset is like, go seek encouragement from brothers, right? And so I went to my father and I told him like, Dad, I'm just having some faith, I guess, faith crisis. I'm scared. And he
Mhm.
looked at me and he said, well, son, all I can say is not a good time to be giving up a job,
Mhm.
good paying job at that matter. So I'm like, what? That's not what I came here to hear. I don't
Right,
want
I
to hear
was
something like,
expecting the
Yeah,
You
yeah.
got
God
this.
is
God's
faithful.
with
God
you.
will take care of you.
Yeah.
And bro, so that's what I got from him.
Yeah.
And then I had a friend call me up and about a week out, and he was like, "Hey, Greg, man, how you doing, brother?" I'm like, "I'm doing fine." And he said, "Yo, man, just been praying for you, and I love you, right, brother?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, yeah, I love you too." He was like, "Man, well, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, you know, but sometimes, man, God can he can test our faith, kind of like Abraham. You can go up the mountain ready to sacrifice and not have to sacrifice something, you know what I mean? And so I was taking it as he was telling me like, yo, you don't have to leave your job, you
Right.
know.
Just the
And
fact that you would do it is enough.
yeah, just the fact that God knows that you would. In the back of
Mhm.
my mind, I'm like, man, I appreciate it, and I took that into consideration, and then I started wrestling with that. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
maybe I don't need to leave, right? Well,
Mhm.
meanwhile, let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to it, right? So maybe it had to be somewhere like I'm trying to give years, but years really aren't going to
That's
do
fine. Don't worry about
justice.
it.
But it had somewhere around 2008, right? I performed at this New Year's praise party. After I performed, I was in the lobby with some of my merch, and two ladies came up to me. Two Caucasian ladies came up to me, and they were like, "Hey, do you mind if we pray for you?" And I'm like, "No, I don't mind if you pray for me." He's like, "Well, can we step outside? It's a little noisy in here." So I stepped outside with them, and one of the ladies, she just did like a pretty general type of prayer, which is cool.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
fine. And then her friend stepped up and she says, "Can I share some things with you?" I'm
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, sure." She goes, "God is telling me that you're a mighty man of valor. And when I look at you," she says, "I see an angel standing behind you with his wings outstretched."
Mhm.
She says, in the back of my mind, like, this is my sign. This is the sign that I was talking about, bro. Anyway.
That's
Um,
funny that you received that, but the sign that literally
right,
said.
right. And so, and look. And so she goes and she says, "And in your hand, I see a sword. But for some reason, you have the sword face down.
Mm,
And you haven't taken the sword up to wield it just yet.
mm,
And God is telling me that you're a mighty man of valor, but you haven't taken the sword up just yet, right?"
mm,
And so after they finished sharing that, and I thanked them and everything, and I wrestled with that for the longest, right? Like I said,
mhm,
this had to be somewhere around maybe like 2008. So I'm holding on to this, like, why would she say the sword is down? I'm like, I'm ministering, I'm sharing my gifts,
mm,
right? I'm like, I, I did not know. So it was one of those things where I just kind of, I think back on it periodically. I just kind of had it in my heart, but I couldn't make sense of it.
yeah.
Maybe she got it wrong. I don't know.
Mm,
But anyway, back to a week out, getting ready to leave Publix. Right.
mhm,
So that week came and went, bro, and it was the day before my last day. A customer
mhm,
came in to Publix, and she says, "The Lord told me to give you something, and I could not make sense of why He told me to give it to you. I wrestled with Him, and He just told me to be obedient. So I'm
mm,
here to give it to you." She gave me a hug, and she gave me this little gift bag, right? And I went back to the office, and I opened the gift bag, bro, and it was a sword about yay big. I kid you not, bro. Um, it was more so of like it was metal. It had diamonds in the handle of it, and it was more so used for maybe opening packages, opening
like a letter opener.
envelopes. Yeah, and so, but when I pulled it out, all of that flooded back to me. You know
Mm,
what I mean? And that's
yeah.
that's what I needed, bro, because I was scared of taking a step of faith. I'm like, I was leaving everything I knew. I was
Yeah.
leaving my retirement. I was leaving my health benefits for my family. I was the breadwinner at the time, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, I didn't really know how, I had plans, but I still really didn't know how everything was going to connect. And when I pulled that bag out, bro, I literally, like, my heart just sank, and I just went out and I found her and I said, I just want to let you know that even though you didn't know what that sword meant,
Mhm.
I know exactly what it means. And I just
Right.
want to thank you for being obedient to God, because
Wow.
that's what I needed. And she
Yeah.
just, she cried, I teared up, and we
Yeah.
gave hugs and whatnot. And boom, next day I'm like, yo, here I am,
Let's
and
go. Yeah, you know what? When you share stuff like that, when you get that sense from the Lord, you don't always know, like, am I understanding right from the Lord? Like, am I even saying this right? So it's always encouraging to hear somebody saying, like, oh, and here's the other half of that that you didn't have any clue about as you were just being obedient.
yeah.
That's dope, man. So as we near closer to the end of our time, I know there's so much more in your story, even just from what I know
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I'd love to get into, but I know we don't have time for all of it. But I would love to hear, see if you can share with everybody a bit of. I know there was a significant experience that you and your family went through um, that I thought was a good testimony of um, just you just talked about the praise, like you were leading a praise party, but just a testimony of just praising God in the middle of storms and the faith and the way that God shows up. And I know you've got many of those, but I wonder if you would share with us a little bit about um, how do I set it up without saying what it is, but you know the story I'm talking about.
Okay.
Share that story.
Crisis of faith again.
Yeah,
Another
let's put it
crisis
that
of
way.
faith
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah.
So, um, for those of you, like Armand said, he knows already where I'm going. So, just layering what I've already said. Um, so fast forward from 2000, when I left Publix, I enrolled in, like, I didn't know I was going to go to seminary, but God ended up leading me to the seminary school that I went to. Right
Mhm,
during that time, God just started, like, softening my heart to the idea of church planting.
mhm.
I was really set against it because of, you know, pastoring is hard enough. And I saw that with my father, much less talking about planting a church. So, anyway,
Right.
but God did what God does, and He softened my heart to that idea to the point to where I was submissive to it. And so,
Mhm,
that being said, um, fast forward 2017, my wife and I, we moved to Georgia to plant a church. In the midst of my residency here in Georgia, we experienced a house fire.
mhm,
So when I left Publix, I took some of my retirement and purchased a property in Georgia for dirt cheap. And the Lord would have it that that's where we moved. We wouldn't have a mortgage, right?
mhm.
So planning a church, you're gonna any bills you can cut,
Right. And you
cut
use all the
on.
money you can get.
Yep, yep. So anyway, 2019, we experienced a house fire, but we didn't have any homeowners insurance,
Mhm,
and that was my fault. That was a very unwise thing to do. I had plans on getting it. It was just one of the things that I put on the back burner. And so
mhm.
when the fire took place and it caught me off guard, I really started questioning my call again, because I'm like, okay, God, nobody messed this up but me. And if this is just a lesson that I need to learn from, so be it, Lord. And maybe I did misread the signs. Maybe I never was supposed to leave Publix. I don't know. It's pretty
Mhm.
embarrassing. It was pretty embarrassing for me, but um, at the time, I felt like I needed to share it, right? And so I got on, with my wife's permission, I got on social media the next day, and I just kind of shared. I'm like, hey guys, um, my family and I, we experienced a house fire last night. We didn't have any homeowners insurance, and we need help. Any help that you can give would be appreciated. And all the while, I'm sharing this, man. It's like God is just shredding every bit of my identity that
Mm.
I assumed, that I thought people had of me as a leader.
Right,
Because I'm
right.
like,
All the pride.
leaders don't make this leaders don't make mistakes like that.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
leaders make sure that they have their house in order, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so all of this stuff I'm like, man, people are just going to look at me a certain sort of way. You know, they're going to lose respect for me and X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but money started coming in. We raised probably about $8,000, right? A couple
Wow.
other people came back. So within a week, we had about 8 grand. And I was walking through the house, um, just seeking for direction. Because I'm like, okay, God, I have $8,000 here. Um, what do you want me to do? Like I said before, if this is just a hard lesson to learn, then so be it. And bro, I felt like God was saying rebuild,
Mm-hmm.
rebuild, rebuild. So I'm like, okay. I shared it with a couple of people. They thought I was crazy, but I felt like God was saying rebuild. And so I was doing a residency at a church called Tri-Cities Church in Atlanta, Hapeville, College Park, East Point area. It sits right in the like right in the middle of those three cities.
Okay.
And so he said, "Well, I know an appraiser that can come out and at least give you an idea how much it's going to cost." So
Mm-hmm.
he called up this guy that used to go to the church, and he agreed to meet me at the house. And we walked through it, and he told me, he says, it'll cost northward of $80,000 to rebuild your home. I had $8,000
Right.
pocket, right? And I said, wow, appreciate you coming out, man. I said, let me ask you a question. What if I kind of oversaw the rebuild, like from a general contractor standpoint, and just kind of did the work myself? He said, well, he said you're still going to be looking at probably around $65,000 easy. And so thought about it. I'm like, okay, appreciate you, man. With that information, I went back home that night, and my wife, we're laying in bed, and she looked at me and she said, "So what we're gonna do?" I said, we're going to rebuild.
Mm.
This is how we're going to do it. I said, I really don't know, but I believe God told me rebuild. And if God told me rebuild, then it's not for me to know how. It's for me to
Mm.
trust him. Right. And
Amen.
man, slowly but surely, like as I shared that with people, like I didn't like that $8,000 came and went, bro.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and so I thought people would continue to give monetarily. But what happened was people didn't give monetarily. God just had me in the right place at the right time. So people who had the know-how would show up periodically
Mm.
throughout the process at just the right time. You
Yeah.
know, so just to jumpstart the story. Um, so at this time, I had started working back at Publix part-time, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
residencies don't really give you anything. It's just like maybe a stipend, not enough to really
Right.
pay bills and stuff. And at this point, we had rent now again. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I was working at Publix, and it was an early morning, and I got a text from somebody that said, "Hey, Greg, sorry to hear about. I heard about the house fire, man. Sorry to hear that happened to you guys. I want to help out any way possible." At this point, I had been receiving like like numerous texts like that. People just reaching out, saying they're praying for us, want to help out in any way possible. I said, appreciate it, brother. I said, by the way, who is this? I don't have your number in my phone. And he was like, oh, you don't know me, but my name's Pete Williams. I go to the McDonough campus, right, of the
Mm.
church. I said, oh, okay, well, appreciate it, Pete. Thank you, man. Thank you for reaching out. And so I just chalked it up to somebody. I locked his number in. Just like another brother, cool. I got another brother willing to stand with a brother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, a couple of days passed, and Pete reached out to me again around the same time. He says, "Hey, Greg, this is Pete Williams again, brother." He said, "I want to let you know that I want to take care of any siding, framing, or roofing materials you're going to need to rebuild your house." And
Wow.
dude, you just talk
Wow.
about like what? And this was in the form of a text, you know. And so
Like
I
you're like,
I,
I don't even know this dude. Like,
and it was months even after that. So I called him up after he did. I said, man, I said, thank you so much. And he says, well, glory to God. Just give glory to God, right?
Mm.
And I told him, I said, listen, I don't know how much materials we're gonna need, but I have a friend who, you know, he deals in construction, so he'll help me measure out the stuff. And he says, well, you have him, you know, send me the amounts, and he said, I'll have the stuff dropped off at your address.
Mm.
And man, I sent him a list of supplies we needed, and true to his word, he had it dropped off. I mean, I documented it with the whole process with cameras and videos of everything, right? So that's one portion of it. So you imagine we get the framework done of the house, right? And then all of a sudden we run into the roof. The roof needs to be completely replaced on the house. I mean, trusses need to be replaced, right? And so I finally meet Pete probably 4 months after, you know, the first like multiple deliveries of material. And he says, Greg, he said, how's the rebuild coming along? And I walked up to him, man, I gave him a hug and whatnot. Man, it's coming along great, bro. I said, well, we have run into one roadblock. I said, we're going to have to replace all the truss. We thought initially that we were going to be able to, you know, to use rafters to rebuild the roof, but because it was initially the house was designed for truss, I said we're going to need to replace the truss again. So I'm trying to get that priced out. He says, that's the only thing holding you up, truss? I was like, yeah. He says, man, you get me the measurements for those truss, I'll have them dropped off over at your house, right? And so the next problem was the fact that I did not know how to take truss measurements.
Right. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Every general contractor I was talking to was like, no, I can't do that. That can compromise my license. So the place where we're staying at just so happens that they were remodeling this old villa, and they had took the roof completely off of it. And so as I'm driving back to the house, the villa that we're staying in, right, I see truss sitting over there. The next morning, I'm taking my son, getting ready to go somewhere, I can't remember, but as I'm driving by, I just hear a guy say, hey, go talk to whoever's in charge there. And I bust a U-turn, and my son's like, where we going, Dad? I said, God just told me to go talk to whoever's in charge. So I pull up, no lie, and the rear of the property is to the rear of me. And so I'm looking in my rear view, and I'm just going to be honest. I look in my rear view, and I'm like, who the hell am I supposed to go talk to? You know, I had no idea. It was Delta had like 50 volunteers out there to rebuild this house.
Wow.
So I'm just looking at people go back and forth, and I get out of my car, and the first guy I walk up to, I'm like, excuse me, sir, elderly gentleman. I go, my name's Greg Harris. My family and I, we had a house fire a couple months ago, and I need to find out whoever's in charge because I need to try to figure out how they got their truss measurements. And he looked at me, looked around, I guess you need to talk to me. Right? The first guy I walk up to, bro. And so he lines me up with a guy that meets me at my an engineer, right? He lines me up with, and he says, this is his number, call him up, he might be able to help you out. So I meet Roger Moss. I'm name dropping Roger Moss. And my wife and I, we priced out how much it was going to cost. It was going to cost us easy $1,500, right? Met Roger Moss at the house. We walked through, and as we're talking, Roger's like, so what do you do? I'm like, well, right now, currently, I work part-time at Publix, and I'm completing a residency at a church in McDonough. Oh, what church at McDonough? I said, Momentum. He goes, oh, I know about Momentum. I said, really? I say, so you know Bart? He says, yeah, I know Bart. He sits on the board of Strong Rock Christian Academy. Him and I, every year we have him come out. And he said, I sit on the board of Strong Rock Christian Academy, and we have Bart come out every year and give a speech to our seniors. I'm like, that's crazy, man. It's a small world. And we both chuckle and kind of just walk it off. So anyway, at the end of it, I'm like, so what's the damage? He goes, Greg, you tell Bart Stone Roger Moss did you a favor.
Wow.
And bam, it was done. You know what I mean, bro? And like, it's just, numerous stories
Yeah.
of that sort of thing. So all that to be said, we saw God restore our home. We're
Mm,
back home now. We were
mm,
displaced for a year and a half, and we're back home. And then during that process of being back home and seeing what God did, all of a sudden I kind of, that's where you and I come into the picture, is
yeah.
because we got invited to this cohort called uh, this Aaron
Aaron
and
and her. Yeah. Yeah.
cohort that challenged us to reimagine,
Mm-hmm.
right, what God was doing. And so I'm just like, okay, so planning a church might not necessarily be what God has been calling me to do. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and just as I watch things, I'm like, maybe it's something along the lines of restoring,
Yeah.
So, and I'll cut it short because I know we're running
Yeah.
long,
We're
but
at the end. Yeah.
I had friends that I had met, and they had suggested it well over a year ago that they wanted to introduce me to this pastor. And so they called me up right at the beginning uh, of COVID, or should I say, when we thought we were coming out of COVID in
Mm-hmm.
2021, January 2021. And they said, "Hey, Greg, we'd love to introduce you to a pastor that we know, if you guys are still interested." So I'm like, called up my wife. Yeah, cool. And so we met Pastor Dortch that following Sunday in January. And this is how it worked. I had been studying Matthew for like 3 weeks. I was on the Temptations of Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting in church. And Pastor Dortch gets up and says, I didn't know what I was going to preach on until about 15 minutes ago. He said, this morning we're going to Matthew, and we're going to look at the temptations of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And this dude just started, once again, those signs, right? This dude just started like unpacking everything that I had been studying. And I'm just like, okay, God. And
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the couple that had invited me, and I'm excited. I'm ecstatic. I'm like, yo, you won't believe it, man. I've been all up in this dude is all in my business. It was like we're on the same wavelength. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, that's where I'm at right now, bro. I'm literally just Pastor Dorch is the lead pastor. Um, I like you said, I don't really go by pastor.
Yeah.
I'm here to assist him.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I've been doing. I've just been serving, bro. I just
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. It sounds like in a lot of ways, the work that God has you on right now is similar to the understanding of the Aaron and her cohort, where you are like Aaron and her to your pastor, where you're helping to hold up his arms so that he can do the element of what God's called him to. And I think that just the heart of service. I mean, even from what you described as the first season of your life after you were recognizing the Lord was really beginning to call you out of your wild and out. You were saying, and I just started showing up on Wednesday nights and just serving, seeing how I can serve. And I think it's not surprising that God would not only call his people into these places and spaces of service, but he would also, while we are obedient into those, call us into the next season of even more that he's going to do in and through us. So I love to hear in your testimony, not only of your obedience, but even bigger, the faithfulness of God to just continue to walk you and your family through all that. And I don't know if it sounds like if I would almost even title this conversation, it might be something like uh, uh, don't miss the signs of God, like because man, that's where God just keep wanting to give you signs. Lord, give me a sign, like it's like straight like DMX.
Yo, I mean, and if we're honest,
Yeah.
I think God he gives all of us signs,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? I mean, much more precious is His word, right? So
Yeah.
by no means do you definitely should not just operate off signs, right?
Right, right. Not as
So
your
don't
primary
say you
way of
heard it
trying to.
on the Freedom Stories. This guy talking about operating just off of signs, right? But in general, God confirms what his word has said oftentimes
There you go.
through signs of many sorts.
Yeah.
And it could be just maybe you're in the grocery store and you may have read a passage of scripture, right? Saying something as minute as, or something as small as, um, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right?
Mhm.
And then somebody in the grocery store in front of you pays for your groceries and then says, I'm just trying to do unto others as God has done unto me, right?
Right.
And that might, and at the moment you might think that, wow, I was just reading that God is so faithful, and then as soon as you get out of your car, you realize you have a flat tire, and you won't be able to make it on time for your first job. I mean, the
Mm.
first day of your job, and you're like, oh my God, where is God in the midst of all of this? This is, just that quick.
Yeah.
We forget and we discount and we'll look at that same happening as just a coincidence.
Right. Right.
And so I just say that to say, like, yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just say that to say, like, so if you're listening to this story and there have been times in your life where God has shown up in a small sign and you've discounted it by way of just assuming that it was a coincidence. I want to encourage you to believe that it was not, because that's the work of the enemy to influence us to doubt what God is doing. And so I'll say this, and I'll shut my mouth and let you redirect this thing. But if we discount the small things that God does, the small signs that God does, then we'll discount the large things that Christ does. And that's just like our finances, right? If we trust God with the small, then he can trust us with the much. So no matter where you are in your faith, that's my word for you. At the end of like right now is, don't discount the signs that God gives you to confirm his word and his movement in your life.
Amen. Amen. I don't have to say nothing else. Like that. that is powerful, and I think really sound way to just continue to grow in your faith in the Lord. That's one of the things. And I said I wasn't gonna say nothing else, right? But
That was good.
But that just made me think of with my daughter. One of the things I told her early on was a lot of those things that everybody calls coincidences. I was like, I just see those as places where God is just demonstrating his presence. And I say, so, and in her language, when she was young, I said, that's just a spot where God's saying hi. Like God's like, yep,
Real
I'm
talk.
here.
Yep.
I'm here. Like, because it doesn't always show up in a biblical confirmation. Sometimes it's like you'll be like reading something, and then you hear somebody say something, and it's like, wait a minute. And maybe it's not biblical, but like you would just call that a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. So I'll just be like, yeah, God, that's just God reminding me that he's here. Like I'm here. I am with you. Like, so, and I love the way that you extrapolate from that understanding of the small things, encouraging us, and as you lean into those, that helps build up your faith and your ability to believe God in the big
now
things.
you pulling Pastor Harris out, right? And I gotta say one more thing. I gotta say, so I mean, is that not what the children of the Israelites did? I mean, God took them through, parted the Red Sea.
Yep.
What a miraculous miracle to witness.
Yeah.
Only to get on the other side and then say, God brought us out here to die.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You just discounted everything you saw take place in Egypt, the red parting of anyway, I gotta shut down, dog.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, and I think it's just good for us to all to build up a history of God's faithfulness with us. And the reality is he's been faithful. He ain't never stopped being faithful. We just don't always recognize it, and we easily forget. So hey, man, Greg, I really appreciate you, man. I really appreciate you giving us some time. If there's Now, I don't know if you're somebody who's as prevalent on social media as I am, but are there any public ways that somebody watching this might want to reach out to you? Is there like an email address or a social media account that you're okay giving out?
Yeah. I'm not. I'm working to be. I'm working to develop a better presence on social media. Right.
And doesn't mean that you have to just because I.
No. That's something that I believe like God has been challenging me.
Mm.
Okay, if we're going to be honest, right? It's more of a, I would say, self a confidence thing.
It's like
I
some
would
insecurity there that.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's more of an insecurity
Okay,
for me.
okay.
You know, on Instagram, it's I'll be that 813.
I'll be that.
Yep,
Okay.
ILLBDAT 813. Ooh,
There we
that
go.
rhymed. I never even meant for that to rhyme. That natural artiste coming out of me. And then let me give you the other one. On Facebook, you can find me at Gregory Harris. I'll be that.
All right, and I will put a link to that stuff in the description. And you guys, I hope that this conversation with my brother Greg has been encouraging, challenging, inspiring, and more than anything, that it actually points you back to the God that we serve and his faithfulness. And so if it has done any of those things and you really have appreciated whether you're listening or watching, make sure you go ahead and like that or give it a review if you're listening, and make sure you subscribe if you've never seen one of these episodes or heard one of these episodes before, so you don't miss any of those in the future. And share it with somebody, because I know that the message, the truth, the encouragement of this conversation doesn't need to end with you. I'm sure there's somebody else that may be blessed by it as well. So go ahead and pass that on. And with that, once again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Freedom Stories podcast, Greg. And we will see you next time.
Thank you for having me, bruh.
All right.